Larry, we are living under judicial tyranny. I looked up the word earlier today, but it's escaping me right now. Critartocracy or something like that? Judges ruling. How are you, Larry?
Well, I call it activism. It's really, kind of a stupid word in many ways. It's like woke. Has anybody ever understood what woke means? They just invented that word for basically perversion, essentially. And now we have activism, and it's been there for a long time. It's not activism. It's exactly what you say, is that they're violating their oath of office, these federal judges, and they are lawless. They think they're above the law, and they act as if they're above the law, and they get protection from their federal judges.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we've got a lot to talk about today, Larry, but before we get into the details of what rogue Judge Boasberg is up to, I just wanted to remind everybody to visit freedomwatchusa.org. People can sponsor you there, donate to the 501c3. We also have an announcement to make, Larry. We've got your Substack ready to go. Your YouTube channel has been restored. It's been kind of like a social media windfall for Freedom Watch, wouldn't you say?
Well, yeah, after a long time, we were not able to gain access. Someone tried to hurt us, and we were taken off. It was not YouTube's fault at all, or Google. And thanks to the kindness and cooperation of the General Counsel of Google, we were able to get it restored. So we thank Google and YouTube for doing that. It was somebody else who was interfering with our work. But it's back up and running, and we're all ready to go. We're able to report on our cases. I've always said, and this was the lead-in to my radio show when I was on Radio America. Now I do podcasts, and it's up there on our pod as well. But we just don't report the news, we make the news. So I hope people will go to our YouTube channel, Freedom Watch YouTube, and see what we do. And we're trying to do a YouTube several times a week, if not every day. Sometimes I can't do it because of court cases and other commitments, but I try to comment on not just what we're doing, but what's happening in the world.
Yeah. And so, as you said, somebody was messing with your social media. It's unbelievable, Larry. Even now they're trying to censor and silence and do all kinds of things. I'm just trying to get to your Substack right now. Of course, people can reach you on X. You're everywhere on media. That's one thing I have to say. Very early, you were in touch with the fact that media was super duper important. People can get to your Substack here. Now, see, it's saying this right now. So Substack is having some problem, but it wasn't doing that earlier. We'll revisit that later in the show. What I wanted to talk to you about today, Larry, is obviously we've got the Chief Judge in the District for Washington, D.C. there, James Boasberg, who tried to issue an injunction stopping Trump from using this Alien Enemies Act to deport dangerous gang members. And today, the Supreme Court ruled that district court judges couldn't rule on stuff like that outside of their districts. What does this ruling mean, and what's going to happen now?
Well, I'm not sure that that was the ruling of the court. What the court
Oh,
ruled, and this makes Boasberg look kind of stupid, to put it mildly, is that he proceeded with a case where he did not have jurisdiction. So the Supreme Court found that jurisdiction lies in Texas, not in the District of Columbia. So he was forced to unschedule his what likely was a contempt hearing, and as well as a hearing for a preliminary injunction. He wanted to make his order semi-permanent. He had issued a temporary restraining order that only lasts for a period of time with regard to sending Tren de Aragua criminals to El Salvador. He wanted to go, full throttle with a preliminary, which also can merge into a final decision as well. But in the long run, the 5-4 Supreme Court, of course, Coney Barrett, who's now shown her stripes as a leftist, she's now siding with the left in nearly every decision. 5-4, the majority said no, President Trump could use that act, but he has to give notice to the people he's going to deport. So it wasn't a total victory for President Trump, unfortunately. I disagree with it. He has complete authority to send people out of the country. If he makes a mistake, obviously, he can correct that. But this court cut him back a little bit. It wasn't a total victory as being portrayed.
Unbelievable. Larry, there was also some news earlier in the week that Chief Justice Roberts was hanging out with Norm Eisen. Have you ever, you must have crossed paths with Norm Eisen. He's a Democrat scumbag and has been there in Washington, D.C. forever, right?
Yeah, he's been a fixture in Washington, D.C. I probably have met him. I don't recall right now, but it is rather peculiar that John Roberts, a married man, is hanging out with this guy.
Yeah. Did you?
No, I don't mean to cast no aspersions. Okay.
Exactly. I'm sure, Larry, you've seen
You
my interview with Norm outside the courthouse where I accuse him of setting up the whole trial with Stormy Daniels.
I've seen it. Yeah, yeah.
I'm serious when I make that accusation. He obviously put Michael Cohen up to it. If you think about it, Larry, I don't want to get too far off track on this, but Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels. This is a good question for you. Michael Cohen paid Stormy Daniels $130,000. Doesn't that seem like a remarkably low settlement figure for a person of Donald Trump's net worth? Wouldn't a lawsuit be settled for, seems like a low amount, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was a discounted attempted extortion. So,
Well, the point being, Michael Cohen made up this ridiculous story that he didn't want to tell his wife and he didn't want to tell Donald Trump because he figured he'd just take care of this problem and then Trump would make him the White House counsel or something like that. I find that ridiculous, having been married twice, not telling your wife that you're going to pay a hooker $130,000 sounds like a crazy idea to me. I think it was that he got this HELOC loan on probably the only property that he had that wasn't marital property, and he didn't want to have to get his wife's consent to get the loan. He could only get a $130,000 loan. And stupid Norm had, put Michael Cohen up to paying Stormy Daniels so that they could claim that Trump did it. And it's a totally concocted case. And the thing is, Larry, this is the same lawfare crew that's cooking up this Signalgate case, right? They insert the leftist reporter from the Atlantic magazine and they gin up the whole case.
yeah, it's all very peculiar. Of course, Michael Cohen is one of the most dumbest people ever to become a lawyer. I've never even heard of the so-called law school that he went to. A total prostitute, a hack, a clown, and someone that, actually tried to extort Trump as well because he wanted Trump to pay his legal fees. And when he wouldn't, then he turned on Trump.
Well, I think he was definitely part of a scheme because, I've also spoken to that guy, Costello, who had testified. That's what I was talking to Norm about there in that clip, that Costello had testified that, he had this whole meeting with Michael Cohen. He was basically setting Costello up, I think, to get to Rudy Giuliani. So where did he go to law school? Here, education.
I have no idea. I forgot. I mean, I never heard of that law school, actually.
American University. JD from Thomas Cooley Law School.
Yeah, Thomas, is that American University? Maybe that's what I thought.
No, it's a private law school in Lansing, Michigan. American University is where he got his BA.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he got his law degree. I think he got a JD out of a Cracker Jacks box, Larry.
Yeah, probably. I mean, look, where you go to law school isn't all that important. It's what you do with it. And this guy, he's a criminal. I mean, he's a convicted criminal. So
Yeah.
this is the legacy of Michael Cohen.
That Juan Merchan case kind of still hangs over Trump's head because it wasn't really fully dismissed, right?
No, he's keeping it hanging out there. And when President Trump finishes the 4-year term, if he doesn't run for a third term, as he jokes that he might do, actually, it's possible that he could be president again. We'll get to that in a second. But that Juan Merchan case is hanging out there. And frankly, there's a good chance that Merchan sentences him after he's done because this guy's just a vile, corrupt, unethical judge. And it's very, very possible. By the way Trump could become president is that he can run for vice president. He's not precluded. So Vance could run for president. He could be vice president, and Vance could resign, and Trump backs into becoming president.
But didn't they create some constitutional amendment that makes that no longer an option?
I don't think so.
Hmm.
I don't think
Trump
so.
sued Juan Merchan to stop the hush money sentencing. This was in, I guess, January. I guess this worked because they stopped it, right?
Well, I think that it was the political pressure and the way it looked for Juan Merchan. The New York state system is corrupt, and like everything else nearly in New York is corrupt, and for that matter, the entire country. But Juan Merchan, he had a conflict of interest. His daughter was working for the Democrat Party against Trump. He made rulings in the case which, frankly, were outrageous and not justified. So I think he just backed off and he just wanted to hold the sword of Damocles on top of President Trump for when he finishes his office. So I don't think it was an act of kindness. It was an act of self-preservation and also an act of, basically just trying to torture Trump, during these 4 years, thinking that once he finishes at 82, that he could wind up going to prison. But that's not going to happen in the end. That will not happen.
Yeah. Good news, Larry. Substack was just having a temporary technical glitch and it's back on. So right now, people who are subscribed to larryklayman.substack.com could be watching this video right there on Substack. And I'm pleased to announce that in just about 15 minutes, 20 minutes here at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, we're going to have a sponsor exclusive episode with Larry. People can subscribe to larryklayman.substack.com to watch that. You can also see it on all the Crowdsource the Truth sponsorship channels. Larry, it's going to be a good opportunity for us to get into some more detail and for you to share with us what is going to happen here, because this Boasberg, he's the chief judge in Washington, D.C. He's also presiding over other cases with Trump, including this Signalgate case. And you had surmised that today he wanted to get into some kind of, show cause hearing or sanctions hearing or something like that. He's also announced a sanction, or sorry, we don't know what kind of hearing. People guess that it would be a sanctions hearing for the Signalgate case on the 10th, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's bad news. I mean, we know that. As I said in the last episode that we did, Jason, he refused to allow for the release under the Freedom of Information Act of the photograph of the dead body of bin Laden. There was no privacy interest in that, and he wouldn't let it go out. Then he lets Kevin Kleinsmith, who is the FBI lawyer who forged an affidavit falsely that helped trigger the Russian collusion investigation of Robert Mueller. He pled guilty, Kleinsmith, to a felony, and Boasberg lets him walk free. So he's obviously a
Ooh.
Trump-hating judge. 4 cases have wound up in front of him recently. He's the chief judge. By the wheel of fortune, it would probably be 3 trillion to 1 that could happen unless he was to start putting cases to himself. So this is what you're dealing with. And the Republicans would be smart but of course, they're rarely that smart. Trump's smart. They're not smart. They just follow because he can get them defeated if he wants to. They'd be smart to make him the poster boy and impeach him regardless of what would happen in the Senate. The guy needs to be gone.
See, I didn't realize that he had been involved in these criminal prosecutions. So Kevin Kleinsmith was the attorney who was prosecuted as a result of the Durham investigation. Isn't that right?
That's right. And you'll love this one. There's another side story to that. And Paul Sperry, by the way, a very fine investigative reporter, has done some stories about the DC bar disciplinary apparatus, which is corrupt top to bottom. Not one person on that apparatus of the District of Columbia bar has donated a penny to a Republican. They donate to Act Blue, to Obama, to Clinton, to Biden, everybody else. You have communists sitting on their board of governors, if you can believe that. I am not joking at all. And Kleinsmith should have been disbarred by virtue of him pleading guilty to a felony. Instead, the DC bar lets him off with mere 7 months of temporary suspension, no reinstatement provision, which is, required even if you come back, from a suspension over 90 days. and just lets him walk free. And who represented Kleinsmith in his bar proceeding? The former head of the Board of Professional Responsibility in DC, Eric Yaffe. They had it wired from the inside. But if you're a conservative activist lawyer or a Republican activist lawyer, then the DC bar has been going after you. And I've been fighting them for 14 years. 14 years. And they're despicable. Kellyanne Conway, Ted Cruz, Senator Josh Hawley, former Attorney General Bill Barr, Sidney Powell, uh, John John Eastman, a very fine professor from Chapman Law School in California, a number of others. They're trying to eliminate conservative lawyers so we cannot defend the conservative movement or bring cases. And this is what you're dealing with. So the Kleinsmith story is interesting because it shows selective prosecution. Is that if you hate Trump and cause Russian collusion witch hunt, you can commit a felony and walk off. But if you're somebody else, then they're going to harass you for all these years, and it drains you uh, in terms of time and money and resources and everything else. But this is part and parcel to it. And Boasberg is part of that conspiracy. It's a nice little club in Washington, D.C. And it
Yeah.
doesn't matter that they're simply Democrats or leftists. Boasberg, believe it or not, shows you just how our system works. He was first appointed to the Superior Court by President George W. Bush. Then comes along Obama. Obama makes him a federal judge. And then, if you can believe this, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, puts him in charge of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Both
Right. Yeah,
political
he's deep
parties.
in there.
Yeah, it shows the corruption of both political parties and how they're all in bed with each other in a very incestuous way. And that's Washington, D.C. It's more than a swamp, as I've said many times. It's a cesspool. And Boasberg, however, should be the poster boy. He should be the first one impeached. We're going to put him up in front of a citizens' grand jury, seek his indictment, get the indictment, try him, convict him, and sentence him. He should be spending time, maybe 30 days, 60 days, 90 days in the clink to think about the way he has acted. But it's not just him. It's many federal judges like him. And you can see that there's now 177 lawsuits as of yesterday, probably over 180 right now, filed against President Trump, the administration, and his executive orders. And they've lost a number of them because they go to these hack judges. And then it goes to the Supreme Court, like what we're talking about with Boasberg, and the Supreme Court doesn't even back Trump up. This was not that much of a victory. There now has to be a hearing before you remove anyone, even a Trende Aragua gang member. And Coney Barrett, the justice that Trump put on the bench, is turning coat. She's going leftist. It was a big mistake to put her there.
Not only that, Larry, Boasberg called for a hearing where he's asking, he wants them to write some kind of like contradictory opinion. Why do these judges think they can like challenge and fight with the Supreme Court? Isn't it not supposed to work that way?
Because they're immune. They know nothing will happen to them. So they act as they wish. And he's probably being high-fived by the large majority, in fact, probably all of the majority of the federal judiciary in Washington, D.C. They stick together. If you file an ethics complaint against a federal judge, goes to the Judicial Council. Who sits on the Judicial Council?
Yeah, they
Other
do nothing.
judges in the same courtroom. It goes into the trash. The courthouse goes into the trash. So, they just circle the wagons. They do as they please. There was even a federal judge out west a number of years ago that raped a woman, and they protected him too.
Ooh.
So it's just unbelievable to have a legal system that is run by these despots and tyrants, which is what Thomas Jefferson predicted they would be, unaccountable to the people.
What about this, Larry? We've got Brandon Gill, I think this is, Texas congressman, files impeachment articles against Boasberg. There he is.
Good for him. It should have been done on principle. They'll never impeach him because they got to get 60 votes in the Senate, but it's worth putting him through that. And now that Schumer is not the majority leader, you remember there was an impeachment way back when on Mayorkas. You remember that, the clown
Oh, yeah.
from Security?
Did they ever even do it?
No, they didn't. They didn't because Chuck Schumer, who was majority leader at that time, wouldn't hold a Senate hearing on the impeachment, and they just simply dismissed the whole thing. But
Ridiculous.
if Boasberg is impeached with John Thune as Senate Majority Leader, hopefully they would have a hearing and hold this guy out to dry publicly, because that's what needs to be done. These judges need to be held out to dry. And I'm not saying every federal judge is bad. No, there's some good ones, certainly. But the overwhelming majority, particularly in the District of Columbia, are compromised and corrupt.
New
And I
York
don't
too.
care. Yeah, and I don't care whether you're talking about a Clinton, an Obama, Biden judge. I'm talking about some of the judges that even President Trump in his first term put on the bench. He didn't know who he was putting on the bench. The names were put in front of him. These lobbyists make money to put those names in front. And then you pay off the senator to recommend them to the president. There are judges, one from Rhode Island, that paid $500,000 to buy his judgeship in political campaign contributions. And one of the judges, I forget his name now, that has ruled against Trump, I think it was, 100,000 or a couple 100,000. They're bought and paid for
It's
by and large.
ridiculous.
Yeah, so that's what you're dealing with. It's very dangerous. At least in the state system, they have to be elected and you can remove them. Of course, that's not perfect either, because these big law firms line the pockets of the judges too, to get them elected. So how do you have a system that functions this way? And I reached that conclusion in 1994 when I founded Judicial Watch. The name means what it says. Now I run Freedom Watch, which does what Judicial Watch used to do when I ran it. And I hope people will go to freedomwatchusa.org, freedomwatchusa.org, and contribute with tax-deductible contributions, because we're taking these judges on. And, last but hardly least is that we are forming a Department of Judicial and Legal Accountability, which is going to be a complement to DOJ of Elon Musk, because we need to take hard-hitting actions and we need to reform the legal system. We need to take immunity away from judges, federal judges who gave it to themselves, and we need to have a legal system that functions. Otherwise, we're going to have a violent revolution.
Well, hopefully not. We do everything to avoid that.
Yeah, I'm not
Violence.
advocating that. I'm advocating against it. That's why I want
Exactly.
to,
Just
to
want to
establish a
clarify
legal
because
system that works. But
YouTube.
when the people don't have any recourse,
Exactly.
that's what
You've
happens.
told us that, Larry. It's important.
Yeah.
So we're going to be in just about 2 minutes heading over to our sponsor exclusive segment. People are going to be able to join us on larryklayman.substack.com, on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com, and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Larry, when we get over there, I want to talk to you a little bit about some activity on the docket here in the Signalgate case. This is American Oversight versus Hegseth et al., another case before Jeb, the bonesman in chief, Mr. Boasberg here, because there's been some interesting developments on this docket, Larry. I don't know if you saw this here, but it's really very unusual. He's got this number 11, the leave to file, being denied. Did you and I discuss this at all?
Yeah, we did. You tried to file a pleading and he wouldn't let you file it. Then you were filing it as a friend of the court.
Right. And the thing that's so unusual about it, I think this might have happened sort of after we spoke about it, because he entered one of those, what do they call it? A minute order or a minute order? Minute order, yeah.
Well, in his case, it's minute.
Exactly. But he put that in there, and this was quite strange, because I think it would have been smarter from his point of view to just completely ignore me. But look, he's put my name on there saying leave to file denied, Jason Goodman, but there's no motion seeking leave. So he's created this sort of disjointed, unusual record. Isn't that strange, Larry?
He is a very strange person. I've appeared in front of him. Yeah, he's strange.
But isn't this a violation of my rights? When I started researching this, well, we'll talk about it. We're just about out of time over here. So you're smiling in a way that really intrigues me. So I'm curious to know what you think of my latest harebrained
No, I think
scheme.
you're industrious and quite creative, Jason. And, and like me and others of our ilk, we want to make things better in this country. So you're playing a role trying to do that, and this judge won't even hear what you have to say. I went through the same thing with Amy Berman Jackson in cases, where I filed things, and she didn't remove them, but she didn't really take them into account. This was during a trial many years ago.
Well, Larry, hold it right there, because we'll get into all of this in the sponsor exclusive segment, and people are going to join us right now. They can sign up for your Substack and join us over there. People who are already sponsoring on Crowdsource the Truth will be able to see the simulcast, of course, and we will carry on with this conversation here about Amy Berman Jackson. I want to get into some more details about what's going to happen next with Judge Boasberg. Stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back.